To say that the gods are evil is a gross simplification of the complexity in Genshin's lore, because there is no such thing as good and evil in the tale of Genshin's world. Only grays, misunderstandings, happenstance, and very unfortunate circumstances. So today, I want to open the argument of Celestia and its morality. This is an important discussion because there's been a misconstruction of Celestia over the course of Genshin's lifespan, and it's that Celestia is inherently evil, while I argue that it isn't. But before we begin, thank you to OperaGX for sponsoring this video. OperaGX is the first ever browser built specifically for gamers. This is my go-to browser whenever I need to research Genshin lore and play Dungeons & Dragons on the side. And today, I'll be diving into 4 great features to improve your browsing experience. Let's go! OperaGX comes with a lot of built-in sidebar features. When I'm reading stuff, I always love turning on its built-in ad blocker and ad tracker. Keeps the browsing experience smooth and away from those pesky pop-up notifications. Another feature I really love in the sidebar is the forced dark mode. Not all websites come in the dark mode, so OperaGX makes sure you don't go blind at night when reading your fanfictions. I mean, your important Genshin lore. Anyway, moving on. When you've got a lot of tabs for your important research, organizing them is my key priority. OperaGX comes with workspaces that lets you switch between groups of tabs really quickly. Or you can have pinboards if you want quick access links and notes to keep your things organized. Really useful if you don't want to lose track of things. Like me, I usually just have like 50 tabs open, so, well, let's just say that some things tend to get lost in translation. Anyway, though, if you've got so many things running at once, you might want to make sure nothing breaks while you're using your browser. But don't worry, OperaGX has a built-in RAM and GPU cleaner that makes sure to kill any resource-draining sites and cookies, so you can have the fastest experience. So go right ahead and download OperaGX with the link in the description, and make sure to comment what your favorite feature is. Thank you again to OperaGX for sponsoring this video. Let's begin with the story of Celestia. It's important to note that Celestia created humanity. The primordial one known as Phanis arrived in this world and waged war with the rulers at the time. This would be known as the 40-year war between the original gods of Celestia, or Phanis and the Four Shades, and the 7 sovereigns, the dragon lords that ruled over the world. Phanis would reign supreme after the war, and thus create humanity. For this argument to work, we need to dissect Celestia's old relationship with humanity. First was that Celestia cared for humanity's prosperity. This would mark the beginning of civilization, and what would be referred to in the book Before Sun and Moon as the opening of the Ark. This was a moment of peace after the war with the 7 dragon lords. Quote, "The primordial one, the great sovereign, began the creation of heaven and earth for our sake, that of its creations which it cherished most, who would soon appear upon the earth. The primordial one and one of its shades created the birds of the air, the beasts of the earth, and the fish of the sea. Together, they also created flowers, grass, and trees, before finally creating humans, our ancestors, numerous as the stars in the sky, uncountable as the sand on the shore. From that time, our ancestors made a covenant with the primordial one, and so entered into a new age. While the author of the book Before Sun and Moon is unknown, it is possible that what they stated about Celestia caring deeply for humans is reliable. The Lord even says that humans and gods had a covenant, or a pact, at one point in history, and that Phanis had a divine plan for humanity. This humble camaraderie between divine and mortal would also be reflected in another piece of lore. According to the Prayers artifact set, once upon a time, the people of the land could hear revelations from Celestia directly. The envoys of the gods walked among benighted humanity then. In those days, life was weak, and the earth was blanketed in unending ice. Then the first flames thawed the ice. It was a time of great prosperity, when all was left in the hands of such heavenly revelations. The envoys of heaven said that the world would soon enter a new and brighter age. This was predestined, that future immutable. This one is the unnamed civilization of the past, an earlier iteration of humanity. The Prayers artifact set showed the potentially first civilization of humanity that was created alongside the Ice Age and the Fire Age of Tevat. So let's go to other ancient civilizations that we know had celestial connections. One was Khaenri'ah, and the other one was the Dragonspine civilization, Salvindignir. We also know that the civilization of Khaenri'ah, while being godless, was not left alone by the divine, Enjo points out that Enkanomiya was the land without heavenly envoys, while Dane only says that Khaenri'ah was a land without a god, meaning that instead of them having an Archon, they were left to their own devices by Celestia playing spectator to their growth and development. This was unlike Enkanomiya that allegedly never had the divine wisdom to begin with until the intervention of another god. Salvindignir, on the other hand, is more famously known for its destruction, which I will cover later. But at one point, they were blessed by the gods, as hinted by the dragon spine mural where a grand deity is depicted giving several people what I would depict as knowledge, technology, or simply science. The text accompanying it even says that the angels help the faithful. Furthermore, we know who one of the people blessed in Salvindignir is. According to the Frostbearer, the kingdom in the Verdant Mountain was filled with joy when she received her blessing. Surely, the blessing of Salvindignir would be everlasting. Priests of Vindignir would also go to the peak and ascend to face the heavens, hearing their words. Remember, Salvindignir wasn't always the desolate ice-capped mountain that we see right now. This city entombed in snow once was a proud, romantic name to call its own, just as the mountain itself was once lush and verdant in the ancient past. This was during a time that Celestia and its gods were not privy to parting with divine knowledge to humanity. So throughout history, and even until now with the presence of the Archons being the middleman between Celestia and humanity, Celestia has not shied away from giving humanity divine knowledge if they so choose. Also, did you know that the Archon's work criteria wasn't only meant to show who was the most powerful amongst the gods, but also who had the best plans for humanity in the long run? According to the divine body from Guyun, that which lurks within and animates this relic are the divine remains of lamenting gods. They are unrealized ideals, designs for a prosperous humanity that could never be. They may now lie deep within stone and sea, but they will not go quietly into the night. Furthermore, notice how the Archons that we currently know have retained their rule. Yes, they've gone through bloodshed, but they've also respected the political aspect of their rule or what doctrine would be the best for their nation that they're currently presiding in. Barbados, who witnessed a dictatorship take over Mondstadt, opted for a free government outside of his control but within his protection. On the other hand, Rukkhadevada, Baal, Beelzebul, and Morax handled a direct connection to their nation's political landscape. It's a fascinating thing that Celestia's Archon War had humanity's longevity as a criteria, but nevertheless, that doesn't mean that Celestia is completely good. There is a fine line between good and lawful, and we know that Celestia operates on one important fundamental, the heavenly principles. The reason I say Celestia is not evil is because they don't harm for harm's sake. They are cold but not cruel, at least from an intense perspective. But they aren't completely good either. They have the prosperity of humanity in mind, but they also uphold their fundamentals, which is that every mighty and ancient city and every austere place of sacrifice must one day return to profundity in the earth. When the first civilization asked the gods how long their prosperity would last, the gods gave them no answer. The heavenly envoys, whoever spoke what they knew, were silent. So to understand this doom, the chief priest, head crowned with white branches, would delve into the deep places of the world. But it was man's greed for certainty that truly angered the heavenly envoys. Their prosperity brought pride and ambition, and the mind to question. So they questioned the heaven's authority, and schemed to enter the garden of the gods. And though they had promised to the people divine love, prosperity, and wisdom, the envoys of heaven were angry, for to question eternity was forbidden, for earth to challenge sky, inexpiable. This sets the tone for when Celestia truly acts. Celestia does not harm, but it will if it must. When humanity goes out of bounds, it will not be afraid to abandon or even to end a civilization they believe has tested them. Celestia is not unconditionally benevolent, but instead just and unequivocally lawful. We follow this with two other examples: the abandonment of Enkanomiya and the destruction of Salvindignir. I've mentioned a while ago that INQURIES has no divine envoys despite being an ancient civilization, and that's because during a part of history, the people of INQURIES fled to the Dark Sea in order to avoid conflict on the surface. This was during a time where Celestia engaged war with something known as the Second Throne. Quote, "The people of the Seven Sovereigns had found refuge in the oceans, and the Dragonaires of the depths ruled this particular place, which led to war between them and our ancestors. Our ancestors chased them into the shadows with the light of 1,000 lanterns, and they hid in those shadows, hunting us. But there was only darkness in this place, and so their hunting grounds were untrammeled. The prayers of the people turned into lamentations, but the Primordial One and its 3 other shining shades could not hear. Our ancestors sought the returning way, for surely the war on the surface had ended by then. But the Primordial One, the first throne, had laid down a ban preventing our ancestors from finding the path home. The reason they weren't allowed to, or even listened to, was never mentioned. But in all honesty, it might just be as simple as going into the Dark Sea was blasphemous and borderline heretical. Perhaps even considering to enter INQURIES' territory was traversing into the old world outside of Celestia's jurisdiction, and the gods didn't like that. I wouldn't even put it past the gods to consider the Dark Sea and the old world as forbidden territory, but humanity didn't listen out of fear of getting slaughtered on the surface. The second is the destruction of Selvindingnir. We know next to nothing about the Skyfrost Nail's descent, given that almost all accounts of it simply state that it came seemingly out of nowhere, when the nail that froze the world descended suddenly, when the verdant city was sealed by cloud and mist, when the unending snowstorms blotted out the clear moonlight, when all life and every interrupted story was pierced by that nail that fell from the azure skies. I can't give you an answer, or even begin to rationalize Celestia's thought process, most likely because maybe they didn't need one. Selvindingnir was prosperous, but it could have simply just been time's up for them. They didn't plot to enter the garden, or do something boisterously idiotic like harness abyssal energy and war machines for themselves. Maybe they just simply ran out of time. Again, every prosperous civilization is doomed to return to the earth. Or maybe I'm just missing a part of the story. Maybe Selvindingnir did something that angered the gods and justified the wrath of the Skyfrost Nail. Which now leads us to Khaenri'ah, the clearest examples of the gods losing their mercy and patience. There is a grand misconception that Khaenri'ah was the gods' fault, when in reality, it isn't. The fall of Khaenri'ah did not begin with the gods suddenly growing angry or envious of humanity, but rather, as the sustainer of heavenly principles puts it, arrogation of mankind, the pride of humanity. The cataclysm had 2 potential perpetrators. One was the alchemist Gold or Rhine-daughter who had her shadowy army consume the entirety of Khaenri'ah, or the foolish ruler that didn't heed Pierrot's words and was blinded by his own power. We have to remember that the cataclysm wasn't an isolated event in Khaenri'ah, but rather all across the 7 nations. Additionally, the first part of the cataclysm dealt with abyssal entities like the Rift Hounds and Durin. This is an energy completely antithetical and borderline dangerous to celestial creatures. It's more possible that Celestia and the Archons were forced to intervene after they saw the absolute chaos that Khaenri'ah brought upon the world. And as a final judgment, forever cursed the civilization as a means of both purification and retribution. To completely chalk up Celestia's actions as evil is irresponsible, to say the least. Morality is a beautiful narrative tool that nobody can completely predict. It's at the same caliber of nuance as A, in which intent is horribly poorly translated into action. Divinity plays like that. They have a grander, long-term plan for humanity, yet fail to understand the present, the fact that people are suffering or dying because of their actions. It's fascinating, and it's sad, honestly. But Celestia is good as much as it is evil. It is simply neither. My favorite part of Genshin's story is the hidden nuance within it, where everything and everyone is unreliable. But that's it for me today. My name is Aster and thank you for chilling with me. Also, happy 3.2.